Let's get ready to rumble!
Okay, we start with Chris Dixon on the editor's letter. Obviously, he's talking about the Carl Froch victory over Bute. He says Carl is a special fighter. And what's really interesting, he seems to be saying that Robert McCracken was more nervous about the fight than Carl was. And what I did pick up when McCracken was taking Froch through some training drills, and rightly so, he was really on Carl's case. Like, you're staying in there too long, move out, move out, move out. And he was really school teacher to student stuff, you know what I mean? For maybe I'm making too much out of it, but McCracken did seem a little anxious, you know? And Dixon talks about McCracken playing his cards close to his chest, almost like roulette, you know, when he said, we've done the work, let's see what Bute's got and let's see what Carl's got. Instead of just coming out and saying, yeah, Carl's gonna win it. Dixon also gives McCracken his props. He also trains a lot of the English amateur fighters too, including quite a few of the women amateur boxers too. So expect to see Robert McCracken quite a lot in the London Olympics, which is coming soon. I'm really looking forward to it now, man. I have to admit that, I really am. This article by Nigel Collins is, it feels like he almost stole it from the video I done called A Cynic's View about PEDs in boxing. It's a brilliant column. It's a brilliant column, you know. Collins doesn't pander to political correct talk of, the good old days and the sport should be clean. He deals with what's actually happening, yeah? And he says it's not surprising that Lamont Peterson and Andre Berto were caught and tested positive for PEDs. He actually believes the majority of top fighters are using them. And he cites the fact that athletes and boxers have always tried to get some kind of unfair advantage over their opposition. He talks about Ted Kid Lewis, who was amongst the first breed of boxers to wear a gum shield. When Ted fought Jack Britton for the world welterweight title in 1921, Jack Britton's manager successfully argued that Ted wearing a gum shield gives him an unfair advantage. And while that dispute seems ludicrous in retrospect today, the same argument is now leveled against PED use. Collins says he's not trying to make an anecdote to equate gum shields to PEDs. He's more rather showing that how attitudes can dramatically change within the passing of time. And I'm going to interject quickly. What he's really saying here, and I'm sort of saying it for him because I don't have to worry about the paycheck from the boxing news. He's more or less saying that in 10, 20, 30, well, it won't be 30 years. 10, 15 or 20 years, PEDs will no longer be a problem in the sport. It will just be accepted in most sports that PEDs are used. Collins says the two main reasons PEDs are banned are that they have harmful side effects and give users an unfair advantage over their adversaries. He states that the first argument of harmful side effects are quite ludicrous in combat sports because an overwhelming bulk of evidence suggests that most boxers will suffer brain damage in one degree or another as a result of repeated head blows. So what I'm gauging by what he just said there, he's saying that should the justification for banning PEDs be that we're trying to protect the perpetrator's health? I have to agree with that. If the justification was to ban it because we're worried about the opponent who isn't taking them, yeah, it would make sense. It would make sense. But why are we trying to protect somebody who's made their own decision about their health? I mean, what Collins is saying, if we're not worried about the guy taking blows to his head for our entertainment, why are we worried if he takes drugs? Why are we worried about what effects his drug use will take on him? Doesn't make sense. The only sense it makes is to protect the fighter who isn't taking them, at least who hasn't got caught. Collins also says that today, the only way for a boxer to be 100% sure that the other guy in the other corner doesn't have an unfair advantage is for him to also use a PED. Now that's cynical with a C. Collins is cynical. But it's no different to what some of the comments that I read when Andre Berto got caught. A lot of people said, well, he was just doing what he knew Victor Ortiz was doing. Collins also says the chief weapon in the fight against PED use is drug testing. But just like an internet hacker, always stays a step ahead of the latest computer security technology, the people who develop and manufacture and those who instruct athletes how to take PEDs will always find a way how to beat the system. Ultimately, testing is like a dog chasing its tail. We'd be better off facing the fact that PEDs have been around for decades, and the real truth is,
we ain't going nowhere. We ain't.
The notion in the 21st century that we are going to live in the old school romantic world of competitive sports and the way we used to perceive them is long past and long gone. That's a quote from Jim Lampley. I tell my friends that if you really want to enjoy sports, you have to turn a blind eye to a degree. But you also have the judgment and the basic understanding that if you watch carefully, you can figure out who's good and who's bad. It's not that difficult. Like it or not, the line between what's good and what's bad in PEDs is already blurred. The only question now is, how long is it before the distinction vanishes altogether? This week on the panel, we have Ronnie Shields, a former professional fighter and now a boxing trainer. We have Darren Barker, a British middleweight, DeMarcus Corley, professional fighter, and Richie Woodall, former world champion at middleweight. And they're asked how they will remember Johnny Tapia. Ronnie Shields says he was a good fighter who helped the smaller guys gain more attention. When he fought Danny Romero, it brought the smaller weight classes into the public eye. Darren Barker says he was a troubled person with a great talent, who was very exciting to watch. His life captured everyone's imagination. I'll personally remember him as a great champion. DeMarcus Corley says he was a legend, one of the best out there. Just last year we had our picture taken together. It's very sad that he's gone. Richie Woodall says he was a hero to his people and his followers. Boxing is a sports and entertainment industry. He provided entertainment for all of those who watched him. Boxing Beats and Rhymes says, I first came across Tapia when he fought Danny Romero. That was when I stumbled on him first. And the guy had a lot of charisma, man. He was good for boxing. And he was great friends with Barrera. And if you study some YouTube footage, you will notice that Barrera had Tapia logoed on his boxing trunks. And Tapia used to have Barrera logoed on his trunks. They became great friends apparently after they fought. Barrera won that on points, and I can imagine that Barrera is taking this quite hard right now. And the Danny Romero fight, Danny Romero was the golden boy of that moment, and he was favored to beat up Tapia. But Tapia schooled him. He came out on some 3D shit with that crazy herky-jerky head and body movement he does, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And Romero was a fearsome puncher. As I remember, it was either Romero's first defense of his title, or was it for the vacant title? I can't remember. But I always got the impression the ring was a safe place for Tapia. The next question is, will Carl Froch end up in the Hall of Fame? Ronnie Shields, he says it's a possibility, as he gave Ward a great fight and he knocked out Bute. But he feels he has to prove himself against some more top contenders. Darren Barker, he says definitely. All you have to do is look at the caliber of opponents he's faced. I'm sure some of the names that he's fought will end up in the Hall of Fame themselves. DeMarcus Corley, he says it's certainly a possibility. If he records a couple more great victories like he did against Bute, then he could well be on his way. Richie Woodhull, he says 100% yes. I can't remember another British fighter who's performed consistently against such a high level. He's fought big name after big name. And I'm not going to contest what Richie Woodhull is saying. The only thing I'm going to contest in what he's saying is, if you're going to vote for someone as a future Hall of Famer, you can't say, I can't remember another British fighter. You have to compare the guy to the rest of the super middleweights in the world. That's what you have to do. This is not the British Boxing Hall of Fame. This is the World Boxing Hall of Fame. And you have to judge it from that. Okay, we go to the letters and tweets. Jamie Ingleby would like to see Chad Dawson fight Nathan Cleverly. He doesn't seem too enthralled by the prospect of watching Nathan Cleverly and Tony Bellew in a rematch. Sean Elvey thinks that the WBC is a joke for taking the moral high ground against Heian Chisora. He cites that the WBC president, which is Jose Suleiman, right? He cites that Suleiman promotes domestic violence against women, and that's a far more heinous crime than what Heian Chisora has committed. He says that the WBC also strips fantastic champions like Sergio Martinez and Toshiaki Nishioka. He says the British Board of Control have brought this all on themselves and they could have banned Chisora and this fight would have never taken place. He says you can't blame Frank Warren and Heian Chisora because it's their living. He says David Hayes' punching power is overestimated at heavyweight and that Chisora will wear him down and stop him late. Well, I understand the sentiment of the letter, but maybe you haven't researched the background story that thoroughly. And if Jose Suleiman promotes domestic violence, Derek Chisora, by all accounts, has no reservations on boxing on Oman or his girlfriend, so I don't know where your argument stands on that, Sean. There's a vast amount of letters praising David Price. And I don't want to rain on the parade, but Sam Sexton still doesn't tell us much. I'm afraid it doesn't, you know. Derek Chisora beat Sam Sexton twice. Sam Sexton nearly got knocked out by Martin Rogan, but for some reason Rogan got some brain freeze and forgot he was a boxer and didn't finish him off when he had him on the ropes. And it's a tad too early to start flag waving for David Price. Yeah? He hasn't fought a heavyweight with a decent jab or one who can throw a right hand. He hasn't fought one of them heavyweights who can take a fairly good shot and come back with something of his own. So until we start seeing that kind of test materialize, no, just let him do his thing. Let him do his thing. You know, he's not too far off fighting the kind of opponent who has them qualities that I just mentioned there. So let's go from there. Tim Underhill talks about a light has shone on two issues: Lamont Peterson's drug issue, Hey Chisora, all of which should not be glossed over by anyone who has long-term interest of the sport at heart. It's all very well to say this is par for the course for boxing, in the words of the late Burt Sugar, who said boxing ran out of reputation in 1910. But this is 2012, and if boxing wants to build up its mainstream fan base in today's sporting climate, nor find itself increasingly marginalised, it should take a hard look at itself. Well, boxing doesn't need to take a hard look at itself. Boxing sells itself, yeah? You don't need expensive equipment to be a boxer when you're a kid. All you need to do is find a gym. They will supply you with a pair of gloves, and you might have to buy your gum shield, which is not very expensive, yeah? Boxing is no different from any other industry that goes through lean times, and then sometimes shit is popping. It's no different. It's no different, yeah? And it's cool to keep banging on about the good old days. Are we talking about when black fighters were denied shots at the heavyweight title? Are we talking about when the mob used to rob fighters blind and use them for their own gains? What days are we talking about exactly? You know? The good old days when kids were so good. Oh, when you used to throw them down the chimneys to work or rob houses. You know what I mean? People don't realize that. Back in the day, the gang problem was far worse than what it is today. It's only they didn't have access to gats and shit like that. Or they wasn't strung out on crack or methamphetamine because that wasn't there. What you think people back then had so great morals that if them hard class A drugs was about, that they wouldn't have took them. Oh yeah, they would have took them. I wonder what a woman who lived in the days of yesterday before Emily Pankhurst tied herself to the railings and they was burning bras. I wonder what a woman of them times would say about the good old days. She would have begged for 2012. And you know, I was reading the newspaper on Saturday, and the journalist alluded to the time in England where you could leave your doors open and nobody would come and steal nothing. And he said, yeah, because you didn't have nothing worth stealing. Ian Owen tells us that somebody put £100,000 on David Price to stop Sam Sexton within 4 rounds. He must have been sweating in round 4. The last time I put some money on a fight was, I think, last year, when Prince Aaron challenged Sam Webb for the British light middleweight crown. And I fancied Aaron to be able to use his reach and outpoint Sam. And everything was going to plan. Everything is going to plan. I think it must have been 15 seconds from the end. And Webb just collapsed. And I put a sizable wager on his fighting her. I was gutted. Just gutted. You know what I mean? That's why I don't bet much. You know what I mean? Keep my money in my pocket, rude boy. Mike Smith says Derek Chisora could do with losing a few pounds, judging by his appearance on the May the 17th Boxing News cover. He is not big enough to carry 17 stone and 7 pounds well. And fitness fanatic David Haye should certainly be no more than 15 stone. You don't need to be an expert to see that. Well, if Chisora comes into the ring in the same shape that he fought Fury, he has no chance. He'll just become a punching bag. On the tweets, we have Ricky Hatton and Darren Barker paying their respects to Johnny Tapia. We have Carl Froch waiting for his little son to wake up in an hour or so they can both play with his new IBF belt that he won. Andre Ward and David Haye also congratulate Froch. David Haye says that's the best performance from a British fighter since Nigel Benn took out Joe McClellan. And Orley Harrison says he's back, talking about poetic justice to end it all in the fourth after he said I'd be on the floor. No hard feelings though, I wish him all the best. Damn, Orley. And Ali Adams replied and said, yeah, you caught me with a good shot and it's a great lesson learned. In the news section, as we know, Amir Khan is trying to get his WBA and IBF belts back, so it was set up a full unification clash with Danny Garcia in the light welterweight division. If anybody's got beef with the WBC, apparently they are willing to respond to your questions. Just send them to matt.christie@boxingnewsonline.net and they say they will print the results. Kendall Hawk travels to Moscow to take on unbeaten prospect Khabib Alak, because I am not going to try and read out his whole name. There's just no way I'm going to try that. You know what I mean? Khabib is apparently trained by Costa Zoo. Ricky Hatton will be providing analysis for prime time on the Pacquiao-Timothy Bradley bout. Freddie Roach will work with the US Olympic boxing team after resolving differences with new head coach Bashir Abdullah. The British Boxing Board of Control are holding a seminar for license holders, and they've dropped the £50 fee. Topics will cover drug testing, scoring bouts and nutrition, and it's all free. Frank Maloney was recently seen at Depot changing his name to Baloney, which is what I will call him if this is the kind of matchmaking he's doing, because he's apparently seriously toying with the idea of putting Orley Harrison in with David Price. Paul Williams is apparently in good spirits, but he's struggling to comprehend the enormity of his situation after doctors told him he will never step back in the ring again. They're saying he won't walk again and he won't box again. His manager, George Peterson, said Paul is in denial right now. It's been that way with him. You tell him he can't or won't do something and he wants to prove you wrong. So whatever the doctors say, he's not listening. But they're saying that walking and boxing is not on the agenda. As we went to press, Williams was due to undergo surgery. He's telling jokes and saying if he doesn't box again, he'll do stand-up comedy. He's in good spirits. He's coherent. I had an excellent conversation with him when I walked in the door on Sunday. He said he'd be ready to go back to camp on Monday. I guess I'm in denial too, because I have seen him overcome so much adversity and come back. If there are no complications with the surgery, Williams will enter a rehabilitation unit in a few weeks. I have to agree with Peter Quillen, you know. I don't think fighters should be saying or making suggestions that their opponent might be taking PEDs, you know. If you're going to go in the ring, go in the ring. As Quillen said, if he has a problem with the test, go take it up with the people who make the test. And I agree with that. You know. Go and see the Boxing or Athletic Commission who is in control of the jurisdiction of your fights, yeah? Go let your manager or your lawyers sort that shit out. It's not really for Winky to cast aspersions like that, you know? That's something for the YouTube boxing community or East Side Boxing. That's something we do there, yeah? Because we don't have a stake in it, so we can say what we want to a degree, you know? Colin McMillan, the former WBO featherweight champion from Britain, he's updated his autobiography and he will be selling copies at the Senny Show at London's Excel Centre, which apparently has Richard Williams and William Joppy on the bill. Is that the same Richard Williams who fought Sergio Martinez? And I didn't realize that William Juppy was still going. Nonito Donaire takes on Jeffrey Mafabula on July the 7th in a unification clash at Super Bantamweight. Donaire puts his WBO belt on the line and Mafabula puts his IBF belt on the line. Antonio DeMarco makes his second defense of his WBC lightweight title against Alexandre Sanabria in Mexico on August the 4th. Commonwealth welterweight champion Denton Vassell is now being managed by Scottish promoter Tommy Gilmore. WBA cruiserweight champion Guillermo Jones is set to defend against Denis Lebedev, who is the interim champion. That's only assuming that Lebedev can get past Jean-Marc Mormec. Carl Froch has been saying how he's more or less destroyed Lucien Boute's career, saying it was the whooping of all whoopings, and a few people are not happy how Carl is belittling his fallen victim. I want to interject, and I'll say what he's doing is not callous, because okay, he gave Bute a bad beating, but it was Bute's ego that took the real damage. More than likely, Lucien is going to lace up the gloves again, and he's going to exercise the clause where he gets a rematch in his contract. All Froch is trying to do now is land some extra finishing punches on Lucien. He beat him in the ring, now he's pressing the psychological advantage. He's telling Lucien psychologically that I own you. He's sending a message out to Bute. And to a lesser degree, he's sending a message out to Kessler, Ward, Dirrell, or anyone else. That's psychological warfare. Now, if he had hospitalized Bute and injured him really badly, and then he said, yeah, that's the whooping of all whoopings, I don't think he can come back from that. Look what I did to him, and started really being callous, facetious about it. Then we could say, yeah, he could choose his words better. But no. While Bute is planning to take that belt back from Froch, all is fair in love and war. That's what we call gamesmanship. Maybe Froch should just take the WBO belt off Robert Stieglitz and go on from there. That's a view I have personally. But they're mentioning names like Sergio Martinez and Joe Calzaghe, and I guarantee you Sergio Martinez will not go in the ring with Carl Froch. That won't happen. Martinez is happier fighting British middleweights who haven't even established that they're the best in Britain yet. Barry McGuigan protege Carl Frampton, he's been getting mixed reviews with his latest victory over unbeaten Mexican Raul Morales. Eric Ochieng from Hackney, he defended his English light middleweight title by some wide margins on all three scorecards against the opponent named A.A. Lowe from Newark. That's not Newark, New Jersey, that's Newark in East London, alright? Eric is a boxer that I've been following, and he does have some promise, And apparently he displayed a beautiful jab that his rival couldn't get inside of and couldn't fathom out. And he showed a good defense, and just an all-round good variety of punches. I haven't seen the fight. I'm just wondering how he managed to be so dominant and didn't stop Low. I have to go and look if I can find some footage of that somewhere so I can just review it for myself. Lee Selby defended his Commonwealth featherweight title against Patrick O'Kane in 5 rounds. Frankie Gavin produced a masterclass to become the first Brit to legitimately halt Lasio Komjati on cuts. The Boxing News predicts that Antonio Tarver will take a clear points victory over Latif Coyote. They also predict Peter Quillen to outwork Winky Wright for a victory on points. Austin Trout defends his WBA light middleweight title against Delvin Rodriguez. and Boxing News predict that Trout should defend his belt comfortably on points. And another fight on the card has the IBF Bantamweight title up for grabs, and that pits South African Vusi Malinga against Leo Santa Cruz from Mexico. Brian Rose defends his British light middleweight title against Chris Castelaw from Scotland tonight. Also on the bill is Carl Johansson, Stewie Hall, and cruiserweight prospect Danny Price. Billy Joe Saunders was scheduled to fight Bradley Price yesterday. I just box-rexed that, and Billy Joe Saunders won a unanimous decision, which is quite a good victory for him, actually, you know, to take the scalp of a wily veteran like Price. There's a feature on Rendell Monroe, who fights Scott Quigg. Rendell holds one of them goddamn awful WBA International or whatever belt. He holds one of them. But he's a good fighter, and so is Scott Quigg. That's a good domestic clash right there. Let's go to the readers' poll, which pits Carl Froch against Joe Calzaghe if they both fought in their primes. They're going for Joe Calzaghe by 83%. Carl Froch a measly 17%. I'm going to do the fair thing, and I'm going to pick Froch to win that. Even though it probably might never happen, there's a good chance it may happen. Because I know in myself, Joe isn't sitting at home very comfortably right now. You see, when you spend years at your profession, and you're one of the best at what you do in the world, and Joe was one of the best in the world, and all of a sudden, you retire and then you're into the world of relative mediocrity, let's face it. No one around you is making any major developments in the world. That was you, you know? That's why we have Chris Eubank talking about he wants to make a return to the ring at 45 years of age. You know, he's calling out Nigel Benn and shit like that. Who knows? Maybe Eubank and Calzaghe can have a rematch. Stranger things have happened. If you want to throw your 2 pence in on the poll, you can go to facebook.com/boxingnewsonline, where you can make your case for either fighter, or you can go directly to www.boxingnewsonline.net, and then that will take you straight to the poll. On the 10 count, they have a column called Visiting Kings. The article is based on Lucien Boutte's visit to the UK last week. They're talking about champions who have come to the UK to defend their world championships. Number 1, Sugar Ray Robinson. If Floyd Mayweather came to England to fight Kell Brook and left a loser, it would not be as big an upset as in 1951, when the brilliant Ray Robinson was deservedly dethroned by Randolph Turpin. Number 2, Muhammad Ali. Ali defended his crown in the UK twice, repeating his win over Henry Cooper at Highbury in May 1966. He came back and thrashed the outclassed Brian London 3 months later. Brian London said he'd like a rematch, but only if you put 50-pound weights on each ankle, which is in reference to Brian London not being able to catch up to the fleet-footed Ali. Number 3, Henry Armstrong. When Armstrong outpointed Ernie Roderick in Harringay Arena in May 1939, it was his 5th defense of his world welterweight title. Before the year finished, he crammed in another 6 and found time to lose his lightweight title to Lou Ambers. Number 4, Archie Moore. Yolande Pompey nearly caused an upset in the early going in his 1956 encounter with light heavyweight boss Archie Moore. The champion was spending much of his time at heavyweight and appeared weight drained before rallying to halt his rival in the 10th. Number 5, Emil Griffiths. Griffiths had his world welterweight title at stake when he decisioned Brian Curvis in 1964. He was carried out of the ring as he was suffering severe cramps in his right leg. He said it could have been dangerous because the cramps got worse in the 15th round, and the more he was getting hit, the less he could move. Number 6, Jose Napoles. Ralph Charles, a London welterweight, challenged Napoles in 1972 who was knocked out in 7 rounds. This fight took place at Wembley, and on the undercard was Ken Buchanan, John Conte and Joe Bugner, who were all victorious. Number 7, Bob Foster. Chris Finnegan gave Bob Foster one of his toughest light heavyweight tests before he was stopped in the 14th round. The gutsy Londoner behind on the cards was chasing a miracle knockout and didn't see the hook that finished him. Number 8, Vicente Saldivar. I have to take my hat off to Saldivar, said Howard Winston, after being outpointed by the brilliant Mexican for the 2nd time on British soil. There just seems no way to stop it. Number 9, Eusebio Pedroza. Crafty legend Pedroza was making the 20th defense of his featherweight title when McGuigan turned in one of the most impressive performances by a British boxer to snatch the title. Number 10, Costa Tszyu. The formidable Australian-based Russian. He blamed his defeat on the delayed start to his bout. The bout actually started at 2 a.m. And this is, of course, the night when Ricky Hatton took his light welterweight title away. I remember that fight. And if a crowd ever pushed the fight just that extra yard to him achieving his finishing goal, that Manchester crowd did exactly that. Then we swiftly move on to the hit and miss section. Number 1 in the hit section is Carl Froch. I'm the man, he told Sky, after his brilliant, ruthless blitz of IBF super middleweight champion Lucien Bute. Number 2, Frankie Gavin. A late change of opponent didn't ruffle Frankie, who boxed well against Laszlo Komjati and got himself some useful rounds. Number 3, Audley Harrison. Audley hasn't stopped believing. A stoppage win over Ali Adams has encouraged him to talk up his chances against the British champion David Price. Number 4, Team Bute. The Canadian-based Romanian and the men around him were gracious in defeat, not looking to make any excuses and praising Froch. Now we have the miss section. And at number 4, we have boxing. The sport is left to mourn the loss of Johnny Tapia and fear for Paul Williams, who was injured in a motorcycle accident and left paralyzed. Number 3, Showtime. The US television network giant passed on televising the Froch and Bute fight. I actually made a video about that. It's called ITV, Showtime and HBO dropped the ball on Bute and Froch. Calix Boxing, if I remember rightly, he did a video on the same topic too. And all I can say to them is,
now you know you done fucked up, right?
Number 2, Kid Chocolate. A dispute around the disappearance of a sample he had given ahead of the Winky Wright clash led to unwanted suspicion to be cast on Quillen. Number 1, Lucien Bute. His first serious step up into world class, and Bute found himself severely outgunned by Froch. Nobody foresaw such a one-sided loss. This is the flashback section. We go back to this week in 1980. Where John Conte graces the cover with the headline, Conte gives it one more try. We previewed John Conte's May the 31st Liverpool Stadium 10-rounder against American James Dixon and said the one-time WBC light heavyweight king had to show his old form for it to be worth his while coming back. He needs a speedy KO to get the show back on the road, is what we wrote at the time. Conte must be ruthless again. For at the age of 29, it was his first outing since losing back-to-back challenges for his old title against Matthew Saad Muhammad, the second of which saw the Scouser crumble in 4 rounds. Tim Moe's preview noted that Dixon had been knocked out in 1 round by Eddie Gregory, aka Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. And skeptically, we reported that this is not at all encouraging. As it turned out, Conte stopped Dixon in 5 rounds and never fought again. There was also a feature on Ronnie Harris, who was the 1968 Olympic lightweight champion, And in 1977, Ronnie came to London and he stopped Alaminter on cuts in 8 rounds. Ronnie lost in a 1978 World Title Challenge at middleweight to Hugo Corro. And on May the 13th, 1980, we reported from Indianapolis that local favourite Sammy Nesmith captured the North American Boxing Federation middleweight title by KOing southpaw Ronnie Harris in the 10th of a scheduled 12-rounder. This signaled the end of Ronnie's days as a contender.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender.
Farewell, mi vida loca. Matt Christie looks back on the tragic life of a great champion. The death of Johnny Tapia at just 45 isn't really a shock considering what came before, but the inevitability of his demise doesn't ease the sadness. The body of the great fighter, whose private life was disabled by horrific trauma, substance addiction and misadventures, was found on Sunday in his Albuquerque home. Authorities were called to the house at 7:45 p.m. and according to spokesman Robert Gibbs, there didn't appear to be any suspicious circumstances. The results of an autopsy are impending. Rarely has a nickname, Mi Vida Loca, My Crazy Life in translation, been more appropriate. Tapia claimed 5 world title belts in 3 divisions. And at his peak, his fistic artistry made him one of the sport's finest. His achievements are incredible when you consider how his life began. The man he believed to be his father was murdered just months before Johnny was born in 1967. At the age of 7, he was involved in a bus crash that killed the pregnant woman who sat next to him. A year later, he looked out of his bedroom and saw his mother chained up in the back of a pickup truck. She was stabbed repeatedly with a screwdriver and left for dead at the age of 32. On witnessing this, Tapia vowed not to live beyond that age and committed a reckless existence. My mother's death kills me every day, Tapia said last year. I just want to say good night, Mama. I just want to hug my mother. He took up boxing as a teenager, winning Golden Gloves titles before turning professional in 1988. It was discovered around this time he discovered cocaine. The first time was a mistake, but the second time became a bad habit. Tapia later confessed about the drug that became a regular passenger on his perilous journey. In 1990, the gifted 22-0 flyweight prospect was suspended from boxing after failing 3 drug tests. That's recreational drugs, not PEDs. In 1993, during his time away from the sport, he married Teresa, who would later become his devoted manager and on several occasions his personal savior. Despite the fact he fell into a drug-induced coma on their wedding night, she remained by his side from that day to his last. The love between them was strong, and Teresa often grew tired of Johnny's wild habits and fragile mind. You feel that if you give up on the marriage, he will immediately end his life, Teresa explained last year. He won't care. He'll have nothing left. But at the same time, even being with him and sticking by him, he's been announced clinically dead at least 4 times, in a coma, on life support. A lot of people who are professional counselors say you can't prevent it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Because it's come close to happening when I was with him. At times, Tapia kept his demons at bay, predominantly during the mid to late 90s, when he was at his fighting best, a feverish boxer. He beat Henry Martinez in 1994 in front of his Albuquerque fans. This was for the WBO super flyweight title. And 3 years on, he added the IBF belt after a resounding victory over Danny Romero. He moved up to bantamweight and claimed the WBA crown when he outscored Nana Yarkanadu in 1998. He would lose his title and his unbeaten record. when he was outpointed in a wild battle with Paulie Ayala. He claimed his preparations were hampered by discovering that the man who had murdered his mother had been killed. He beat Ayala in a rematch. Then he won the WBO Bantam belt by outpointing George Julio. But by 2002, when he thrilled a rammed York Hall by beating Eduardo Alvarez, and then controversially unseated IBF featherweight king Manuel Medina, Tapia's skills were eroding. A loss to Marco Antonio Barrera that November was his final flirtation at the top. He fought on until last year, finishing with a record of 59, 5 losses and 2 draws, 30 of his wins coming by KO. His adoration for boxing never dwindled, as he trained kids at his local gym and worked for Showtime. Whenever clean and sober, Tapia was a joy to be around, full of love and mischief. But darkness relentlessly hounded his troubled soul, and we can only hope now that he is at true peace. Our thoughts are with his family. I know Johnny will be missed by everyone who ever met him. Teresa stated after his death, he was a special light in this world. He loved people so much, he made friends with everybody so easily, and he kept those friends forever. He will remain in our hearts and be missed by all of us very dearly. Johnny Tapia, born 1967 and deceased 2012. Okay, remember, this is the official and original Boxing News review, roundup, or wrap-up, or whatever you want to call it. This is the original, and I suggest you accept no imitation. Peace out.